Good afternoon and welcome to today's program, Current Trends in Succession Planning. This event is brought to you by the Pacific Northwest Defense Coalition and Acumen Executive and Talent Search. Founded in 2007, Acumen is a Portland-based recruiting firm with a global reach. Acumen is committed to a strategic and consultative recruiting approach. And as an active PNDC member, we appreciate Acumen Executive and Talent Search's continued willingness to lend their considerable expertise to our members. We are pleased to welcome Karen Anderson and Suzanne Hanifin from Acumen Executive and Talent Search as our presenters today. I'll turn things over to you ladies.
Thank you, Kate. We are delighted to be here with you and our PNDC members and friends. Let me introduce myself. I am Karen Anderson, Business Director of Acumen Executive and Talent Search, and joining me is Suzanne Hanifin, Principal and CEO of Acumen. We appreciate PNDC allowing us to host this important webinar on succession planning and current trends. Today, we will discuss succession planning and current trends, and what we hope you will learn is that culture is number one, and more importantly, how that culture affects or impacts motivation and succession planning. We will dive into recent statistics, and we will take a real-life look at a case study depicting current trends of succession planning, which hopefully will leave you all with food for thought and ideas as to what steps you need to take to prepare for your succession planning. Did you know there is an urgent need for leaders? Studies indicate only 40% of companies can meet their future leadership needs currently, and out of those, only 21% can only meet those needs satisfactorily at best. We all know good people are hard to find. Great leaders are even harder, and not only is there a shortage of them, but they are in great demand.
So before we start, let me tell you, as a recruiter, we see this all the time. We get calls from executives, C-levels, directors, and managers that tell us, get me out now. As an owner and CEO, you may not be aware that this is happening, but believe me, it is. After 20 years of recruiting, there are really only 3 reasons why people leave a job. They leave a job because they don't feel valued, or they cannot affect change. And lastly, they leave if there's been some leadership or ownership change that has affected or impacts their job.
Now, because we cold call into companies and recruit great candidates for new opportunities, not from our clients, of course, people will listen to us, wait out, and take a new job for better pay, better benefits, and because of opportunity and career advancement, going from a $5 million company to a $50 million company. Also, they secure jobs for more challenging work. For example, that they have been in a position for a long time and really want to try something new or make a change. By the way, this is a really good point. Given the tight employee market now, have you discussed or do you provide career paths for your key personnel? This is actually a great retention initiative for you to implement. And remember, executives are calling us.
As one CEO who has heard over and over again that human capital is the most important asset to your organization, and as a recruiter, I have to concur. The numbers are staggering. On the statistic of just retention alone, according to CareerBuilder, a 5% retention increase can lead up to a 95% increase of profitability. This is huge. For executives, the numbers are even greater.
I think this information is really critical to you when we talk about succession planning. If you can increase productivity and profitability, then whether you're looking to sell your company or any type of transition, all it is going to do is to better you and make you and your organization more desirable. Now let's flip it, as this is also important as we dive into succession planning. What is the cost of a new employee? A salaried employee that is making $80,000 a year currently equals a cost to the company between $40,000 and $50,000. That is huge, especially bearing in mind that when you take it to the executive level, costs become even more exorbitant. Statistics show that it can be more than 2 times the annual salary of hiring a new executive, bringing them in and onboarding them. So it is critical to look at this when we are talking of succession planning. There is one more vital bit of information we would like to distill to you, and that is the cost of a bad hire. I love Zeppo's CEO, Tony Hai, who said it has cost his company well over $100 million a year just on bad hires alone. It goes back to that statistic that said 5% of retention can yield as high as 95% increase in profitability. Now let's view the exact opposite. Not only does the cost of a bad hire affect your profitability, it significantly affects employee morale, client relations, your external branding, and fewer sales, not to mention higher costs to recruit and train others in that department. We have all seen it. One great person can raise your organization to new levels, and conversely, one bad hire can tear up an entire team or bring a department down, severely impacting your company's morale. I think it is important to keep this all top of mind. As I said earlier, culture is the most important thing. Can you describe your company culture in 5 words? Do you live it with all your employees? Are you a role model for all at work on a daily basis, reinforcing your mission and value system? In order for us to understand succession planning, it is crucial to realize why people leave your company. It is also vital to understand why people take new jobs. Your culture not only defines your employee and management team, but it develops over time. And that's why a bad hire can negatively change your company's culture. To recap, we are talking about the cost of retaining and recruiting new employees as your business grows and evolves. We have all heard, especially in the last couple of years, culture, culture, culture. But really what it comes down to is that as the leader of your company, you drive the organization's culture. It is important to articulate and live what your culture is, because that will be critical to you when you hire for your succession or sell your business. I am not going to read you the definition of a succession plan. It is really about replacing yourself as a leader of your organization. Before we dive into some succession plans that we have seen here at Acumen, we have found that there are only 4 ways to replace yourself. Growth from within. You can groom your successor, a current employee, somebody that you know who is already employed with you. External hire. Find someone new from the outside. Give it away, whether through an ESOP employee ownership program to a spouse or a family members. Sell your company outright. So replace from within, externally, give it away, or sell it outright. Shockingly, statistics show 67% of companies do not have a succession plan. Do you have one? The most important thing to do is start reviewing your preferred succession plan and create a plan. Suzanne, let's talk about some real-life examples of what Acumen has experienced.
Thank you, Karen. What great information to lay the foundation to understand succession planning. Before we begin with specific scenarios, I want to highlight the major shift of today's workforce. As we know, we are all aging. Baby boomers are retiring and leaving the workforce at a fast clip. Today, millennials make up a larger number of workers than boomers. This is becoming an important factor in succession planning. Not only does more people want to sell their companies, but it's also harder to find your replacement. Like Karen said, you can grow your replacement, hire your replacement, give away your company, or sell your company. We have all heard the major horror stories about people who did not have succession plans. Then something bad happens to the CEO, president, or owner, like in our first example. Acumen worked with a $25 million manufacturing company a few years ago. We had placed their CFO. On our CFO's second year, the CEO had a stroke. It was devastating to all employees, devastating to sales, devastating to the operations of the business. 6 months after the stroke, the owner's wife contacted us to help find his replacement. However, due to family dynamics and infighting, Acumen did not engage. The wife and the owner finally decided to put their son in charge. However, the son had no strong leadership experience, and the truth was he did not want any stock or a high salary to go to an outsider. Of course, Acumen followed up with the family to see if we should change our search from a CEO to more of a general manager or an operations person. This would have helped bridge the son's lack of experience, plus giving him some mentoring to grow into a true leader. I'm sad to report that about a year after the owner's stroke, he did pass away. Afterwards, the company sold for a fraction of its worth when the founder was running the business. Not only was it during the economic downturn, but sales were down. Key employees were leaving the company, poor leadership, and a dysfunctional family dynamic. The CFO and I agreed if they had a succession plan in place, the family would have been able to sell the company when they wanted to, not because they had to. Giving away the company. We are currently working with another manufacturing firm that has transferred the ownership from the patriarch to his two sons. Just like the previous company, the patriarch, or CEO, has health issues. However, this patriarch has a plan. He did leave his two sons embedded into the business already to take over. However, just like the previous example, during this transition, sales went down, people were leaving, and I think this is really important to talk about because it's typical in any transition. Remember what Karen stated earlier of the 3 reasons why people leave their job? They leave a company when there's been a change at the leadership or ownership level that affects their current position, regardless if this is succession, publicly traded, privately held company. But getting back to the example, unlike the previous family, this family agreed to hire a president to run the company while one son would become the CEO and the other son the chairman of the board. We are in this search now. We will keep you posted and share with you in our next webinar on how that transition is going. But we've seen this so many times. It can run smooth and easy when there is a plan. Which brings us up to Chuck and his $40 million distribution company. This is the most common scenario that we see at Acumen for succession plan. This scenario is when the owner retains part of its ownership, either a majority or even a minority share. They bring on a person from the outside, whether the person's titled is the president, general manager, or COO, chief operating officer. We work with them on establishing some sort of deferred compensation plan that will vest in a certain set amount of time. The average vesting is 4 to 7 years. After the vesting period, There is usually another stock transfer or buyout. It needs to be stated that this can lead to golden handcuffs on both sides. Both parties are fully committed to each other. So hiring that right person is critical. So let me talk about Chuck. Chuck is the ultimate sales guy. People and I love Chuck. He is vivacious. He is the life of the party. People know him and respect him. Chuck has a succession plan. He and his wife came to us knowing that he wanted to slow down and retire in about 5 years. Chuck sat us down, looked us in the eye, and said, "I want to hire a Chuck Jr., someone just like me." Well, we all thought what you're probably thinking yourself. Chuck would not like Chuck Jr. This is not what a business needs. Most companies don't need two salespeople running it. The ego's alone. So we asked Chuck if we could interview his executive team. Chuck was savvy enough to say yes to our request. As you can imagine, the executive said that they wanted the exact opposite of Chuck. Chuck was able to grow the company to $40 million in revenue, but the team wanted processes, procedures, and even metrics to measure success. They did not want a PTO policy that was based on Chuck's mood. So we went back to Chuck and shared with him our findings. Chuck agreed, even though he was going to have the ultimate say. And after interviewing, he did hire Mike. Mike is an analytical person who is process-driven as his COO. Here was the outcome. Chuck's company grew 17% the first year in profitability. Year 2, 35% profitability, with 20% of it being organic growth. The best approach is knowing your culture, then hiring for that culture with an end game in mind. In Chuck's mind, the end game was growth. Lastly, let's talk about another Chuck. Boy, it sure sounds like Acumen sure works with a lot of Chucks. However, this company is a medical distribution company. Do you remember that chart we showed regarding workforce changes and how millennials are now the largest percentage of workers today? You must remember that all boomers and owners are competing for the next generation of leaders. So this Chuck decided to grow his own replacement. He too has a succession plan. His successor is his ops person. Chuck was also toying with an ESOP for his entire leadership team, but finally chose just his one operations person. The COO was promoted to president while Chuck maintained the CEO title. He was embedded his daughter into operations at the same time. Now his daughter has a mentor to work with her in operations and to grow her to eventually become the president. Acumen was brought in to round out the executive team and to find the VP of Sales and CFO. As far as it has been working great. The biggest challenge from a recruiting standpoint was to get all three of them to agree upon the same person, which we helped them by having them identify the culture. As Karen asked, can you describe your culture in 5 words or less? Understanding the skill sets and to balance the new president and the daughter's behavioral traits was critical, and we were able to find the right balance of executives. So those are 4 big examples that we see all the time, but let's talk about today's trends. I mentioned just a few of these examples that we hear. Acumen receives probably between 10 and 12 succession calls per year. However, last year was really interesting. We heard from about 4 to 5 companies of 30 and 40-year-old CEOs looking to hire his or her successor. The typical calls have always been between 50, 60, and even 70-year-olds, not 40-somethings. Most of the time, Some stock is offered while the current CEO retains some ownership. They bring a person from the outside, title them, whether it's a president, general manager, COO. They establish a deferred compensation plan that will vest in a set amount of time. Again, the average has been 4 to 7 years. And some of the companies require an upfront buy-in. Others transfer stock after the vesting period, creating once again those golden handcuffs on both sides. Finally, it is important to say that we not only have seen straightforward scenarios, but we've seen a lot of the combinations of these 4 ways to exit your company. And I think that flexibility needs to be brought up and for you to determine what's right for you. So just to recap, you can sell your company, you can give your company away, you can hire your replacement, and lastly, you can groom your successor. Karen?
So based on Suzanne's input, you can see that there is a lot of flexibility as to how you set up your succession plan. And a lot of it has to do with what works best for you, your future goals, the resources available, and having a plan in place. We at Acumen appeal to you not to be like the 67% of companies that fail to plan. Begin to design your plan today, and remember that old adage, words without action will not realize your dream. Thank you all for your participation today. We hope that this webinar has struck a chord with you all. We at Acumen wish you all great success and are happy to field any questions or partner towards your success. Please do not hesitate to reach out to us. We're here to serve our PNDC partners.
Great. Thank you so much for your presentation. We do have a few audience questions. First of all, how early in the process should someone call you?
Well, I would say earlier the better. And I'll give you an example. Because of our consultative approach coming in and really helping you not only shape that position, but also looking at it as an organizational development position as well, we tend to interview all of the stakeholders that are involved in the decision making. For an example, there was this one position that we did interview all the board members. And not only did it help them get very clear and very concise on the goals, but really having very clear and concise expectations to the newest person that they hired. So therefore, it becomes almost like a win-win and beneficial for all because there's clear expectations, able to meet those expectations.
Great, thank you. Another question, can you help construct a job description that will be attractive in this tight job market?
Absolutely, Kate. Because we offer this consultative service, ideally we'd like to meet you before you identify or decide on the role, as we can help you form that plan and consider options that you might not have thought of. Our commitment goes way beyond just hiring for a job.
Wonderful. And a clarification here, what level of executives do you recruit for? Is it just the C-suite?
Suzanne recruits more C-levels than anyone else I know in town. But actually, Acumen recruits C-level, VPs, directors, and managerial staff, controllers or business analysts, anyone that manages people or processes.
Great, wonderful. And lastly, and most importantly, how do people contact you?
By all means, reach out to me. My number is 503-307-9219. Visit our website. We're here to take care of you.
Wonderful. Thank you.
And I think we wanted to add, as a PNDC members, we would love to meet with you. We will come in and help with positions today, positions tomorrow, and your strategic plan.
Wonderful. That is such a valuable offer to work with our fellow PNDC members to help them through a lot of transitions. Awesome. Thank you so much. We really appreciate you joining us here today. That concludes today's webinar.